that states with a higher percentage of minorities on welfare rolls are more likely to be punitive, implementing policies that reduce welfare caseloads, such as strict time limits on temporary aid to needy families. Family caps that deny benefits to additional children, and benefits disqualification for small violations, like a child's poor school performance, something like that. So by contrast, states with poor populations that are predominantly white are more likely to be generous, adopting the federal government's 5-year lifetime limit, waiving work requirements if participants have young children, and continuing to give benefits to children even if the parents reach the time limits. So this is in particular based on what's going on in Oregon, which is a predominant Caucasian state, essentially, and they're very generous with their welfare, which has kind of created a sort of welfare utopia, according to the article. So you guys read the article. What do you guys think about it?
So I think we had talked about this before, right? I think we said if they did a study, they would find that in the U.S., the whiter a state is, the more generous they are with the social safety net. And I'm glad like somebody did the actual work. I think last time we were talking about Vermont, right? So if you have a state that's led by the moderates or liberals, and it's mostly white, I think you'll find they have better welfare. They're more generous welfare than states that have a huge black population. And the best states to compare is if you compare the South, right, which has big. Whoa, we haven't. Okay, that's better. All right, so if they have huge black populations, you see that they have less generous welfare, just because it's people, man. People always can sympathize and empathize with people who look like them and people who think they share the same values. So in Oregon, they're looking. It's a 90% white,
86.6, but yeah,
86.6. It's like 3% black. So they're probably looking at it like, yo, I can empathize with that guy because he's out of work. He's probably a hard worker. He's just falling on hard times, right? Which is like how you should, just treat everybody. But in Mississippi, for example, where the population is 30% black, 40% black, and black people make up the majority of the poor people, thus the highest number of people per capita, per population who receive welfare, then you see welfare being vilified. It's like, oh, those people are just lazy. They don't deserve welfare. They're gaming the system. So, that's just, perception based on people looking like you, and you sharing or believing that you share the same values as people because they're the same color as you. And, you can see that another case study is Scandinavia. So if you go to Scandinavia, which is very white, and all the people share the same background, the same, they're all Nordics. So they have very generous welfare, right? But ever since immigration started growing in those countries, now you're seeing the rise of the right wing in those countries. And those countries are now vilifying Muslims and Arabs, who mostly make up the majority of the immigrants, right? And now they're talking about let's cut down on this welfare program that's so generous. So, there's case studies that we can see. So I was not surprised at all by this article.
Yeah, it didn't surprise me, but it kind of, I was on some angry black man shit reading it because it made me say to myself, wow, in the 80s, good old Ronald Reagan, when he decided to prop up the welfare queen, who did he make that out to be? A black woman, right? And here we are, reading the article, and evidence is showing that the welfare queen may not be, isn't black, y'all. you know, and and again, with programs such as TANF, the Temporary Aid for Needy Families, SNAP, supplemental nutrition assistance programs, they're necessary, and I have no problem with giving it to people who are needy. But it's like we talked about in this article, and like we're mentioning, is that they always trying to vilify people of color, who basically need these programs and can fall on hard times just as any person can. And it's almost looked at as we get the stigma of lazy. Black folks get the stigma of they're not trying. Black folks get the stigma of, abusing the system. They need to get off the rolls and all this bullshit, and that's where my anger came from, is that when you look at the evidence and as we mentioned, as we talked about before, if you look at the population of the country, how can it be that, blacks who black and brown people dominate the participants in these programs and are on the welfare roll more than the majority of people in this country? That's basically saying that all white people are rich and middle class and black and brown people aren't. And that's not the case. So we always knew it was bullshit, but it's just great to see that the evidence is here. But even when we look at it beyond just, just the citizen factor, really, when we look in this country, the biggest, if you want to look at welfare, is corporate welfare and also farm subsidies.
Yeah.
And people don't pay attention to that part. We never, just like last week, we didn't, when we talked about affirmative action in colleges, and that we don't look at the legacy component. Well, just in this country alone, we don't look at the corporate welfare component. Let's think about 2008. What happened there?
Here's the thing. Right? That's a good point that you made, because imagine if the farmers in Iowa and Indiana and the Midwest, imagine if the majority of them were black.
Oh, of course. Well,
right.
You already know what time it is.
What do you think would happen with those subsidies? Or how would most people feel about those subsidies?
Hate them. They'll hate them. They'll discredit them. They'll want to get rid of them. And, they'll probably the farmer welfare queen, or king or what have you. And even, again, corporate welfare, right? General Motors failed. What too big to fail with the banks? What was that? That's corporate. That's welfare. So, providing subsidies or interest. So, I've always, whenever I look at stuff like that, I'm like, stop making it about the people. People should be taken care of. That's the point of a country, that you look out for the citizens who can't do for themselves. That's the welfare, the good of the country as a whole. But again, they never talk shit when it's a certain interest. And again, as you mentioned, Robin, what this article really showed is that when it comes down to people of color getting benefits that they pay taxes into now, you can't have that. But when you're white is right. It's sad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, T, that's really an excellent point. A lot of people don't know that corporate welfare is it costs twice as much as welfare to individuals. So you have a lot of these corporations. I mean, a lot. I think Bernie Sanders and a lot of these politicians, they are talking about how companies like Amazon and Walmart, these corporations, they were basically paying people peanuts and expecting the government to basically make up the difference in order to get these people out of poverty. I mean, so you're working at Amazon and they're paying you like a minimum wage, and then they're telling their workers to go apply for food stamps. Mm-hmm. So then people are having to supplement their income through the government instead of these corporations giving them actual like a living wage, that kind of thing. But yet and still these corporations are getting billions and billions of dollars of subsidies, but they're not passing it on to their workers. It only goes to the executives level, the CEOs, executives, that kind of thing. So that's another fucked up thing. But yeah, you definitely see more vitriol when it comes to people people referring to black or other or non-white people recipients of welfare. I remember, in 2012 when Rick Santorum was running, he started talking about, I don't want to give black people black people welfare. He said black. He said black. He didn't finish with the K.
He didn't put the C. He didn't put the C nor the K.
He didn't put the K.
He caught himself.
Yeah. Knowing him, he would have put 3 Ks on the end of that.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, Yeah, so that, I mean, he obviously says that to a room full of white people. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those dog whistle things. You know, you're trying to make it seem like, oh, all these black people are on welfare, they're all taking your money, and this, you can't have all these black people on it. But you know, when the reality is that, you know, when it's other people when it's white people who need assistance, then you're mostly fine with it. I mean, you can like draw a straight parallel to, you know, the drug crisis, you know, the opioid crisis. I mean, when it's white people in suburbs, you know, overdosing, you know, with opioids, pain pills, whatever it is, then, you know, it's a crisis or whatever. You have to
give health crisis.
Yeah, you have to give all these people all this help or whatever. But when it's black people, you know, overdosing with crack or whatever, then put them niggas in jail. So,
well, here's another good example is defense spending is the biggest welfare program, maybe next to corporations, or even bigger than corporations. It's a jobs program, really, when you think about it.
Yeah,
right.
$700 billion we spend. I mean,
during peacetime, at that matter, right?
During peacetime, and some of these guys don't even want. Some of the people in the Pentagon were like, we don't need it was a certain jet. It costs a lot of money.
F-35.
Yeah, they're like, we don't need it.
Shut up and take this money.
Yeah,
right. Just shut up and take the money. Right.
All these bases all around the country. There's nothing but a jobs program. So I mean, there's a lack of consistency, and like you say, there's a lack of empathy and sympathy for people who look a certain way. Oh, and by the way, just trivia. In the article, it said they didn't allow black people to Oregon until 1926.
Yeah, that was some crazy shit, right?
It was in their constitution that black people are not allowed into Oregon.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Damn.
But now that Nike said, fuck that. Bring them all here. Nike's the reason why black people are there. Because they increased the population, I think, in the 80s, right? If I'm not mistaken, and started seeing growth spurts in blacks. I'm like, yeah, it's probably when Jordan was created, the Jordan brand was created out there some more.
Well, at least Michael Jordan and LeBron James are allowed in Oregon.
We know that for a fact.
I think they have to leave by sundown.
Yeah, you go play the Trailblazers, and you have to leave like immediately after the game.
Right after the game. Don't even press conference. Do that shit on your phone.
Hey, you can't even shower.
Put on IG Live.
Get the fuck out of here. We put you on a bus. Get you the fuck out of here.
In the back of the bus, at the matter of fact.
Exactly.
Back of that motherfucker.
Exactly.
God, that's fucked up, man.
It is fucked up.
God, yeah. 1926.
That was some crazy shit.
Shit.
Yep.
That was crazy.
But speaking